We're going to be talking this month about how life is difficult. So I just want to share, I don't think I'm going to get nearly as much participation as Jared did, but raise your hand if you think life is difficult. Okay. We didn't want to cheer for that one. Yeah, like when I raise the hammer, say life is difficult. No, it's not going to work. That's not as exciting. All right, so life, and I'm not saying life is terrible. I'm not saying life is always difficult, but there are times when life is difficult. Could we agree? Yeah, life can be hard. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how how much money you have. It doesn't matter what grade of a job you have. Life gets hard sometimes. If you're a teenager right now, life can get hard, can't it? There's a couple teenagers in here. Life can be hard as a teenager. It can be hard getting up every morning and going to school and not knowing what the meaning of it all is. It can be hard navigating relationships and friendships. And man, I coach girls soccer, and not that you didn't know that already. And now I feel like I can't talk about soccer at all because people give me such a hard time about it. But anyway, it's hard to watch the relationships. Like these girls will come in and out of friendships 1 week at a time. Like navigating friendships and relationships is so difficult as a teenager. Dealing with the stresses of that on top of school, tests, papers, not getting enough sleep, trying to play sports. It is overwhelming. And the bad news is that's the easiest part of life. It's true. It just gets harder. You go to college. College is hard. I don't know how many of you dropped off a kid at college for the first time. That's hard. It's hard to drop your kid off at college as a parent, but it's hard as the kid. It's hard to leave home for the first time and feel like, I don't know anybody here and I'm supposed to make a way for myself. It's hard to graduate college, isn't it? Do you remember? It's hard to graduate college and be like, oh, now, that whole season of life is just, that was like a season where I had a plan. Like you go to college, you go to school, you go to trade school, whatever. Like you're building towards something. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm just going to work for the rest of my life. Like there's no other, right? There's no other thing. Like it's not like, oh, you now I get this job for 4 years and then I get that job. There's no plan. It's kind of weird. Like you're born, we got this plan for you for a couple, maybe 20 years. And then it's like, see ya. Right? And I don't know, the first job you might not love. Second job you might not love. Sometimes working every day, all day is like, what am I doing? Am I making enough money? Am I getting ahead? Is this what life is all about? Is this all life is about? Is this resonating with anyone? Yeah, I know we're going to have a good time after church, so I'm really going to bring you down, okay? Let's face it, life can be hard. It can be hard to get older. Can I get an amen? Yeah, it can be hard to get older. It can be hard physically. It can be hard mentally. It can be hard emotionally. It's hard emotionally because it is hard physically and mentally. It's depressing. I love getting older, by the way. I'm really embracing it. Yes, it's coming along. It's coming along. The longer that you are on earth, I'm going to just get more depressing. We're going to really lean in. Ready? The reality is, the longer you're on earth, the more loss there is. You lose people you love. Grieving is hard, isn't it? Losing friends, we won't do a show of hands, but I'm not talking to death, but the longer you're alive, how many of you have friends that you thought we'd be friends for a long time and now they're not your friend anymore? Oh my gosh, people are raising their hand. I said don't raise your hand. And now they're pointing at me. What? Friendships come and go. It's crazy. Marriages can fall apart. When you get married, you're like, this is going to last forever. I know. I have good friends whose marriages didn't last forever. And that's painful, isn't it? And then some of us choose to have kids. And it's so rewarding. And it's so amazing. But it introduces a whole nother level of potential pain because they have free will. And you can't control any person. And you can't control any circumstances. And it's hard. It's hard to watch your kids struggle, isn't it? Those of you who have kids, hard to watch your kids struggle. And so life is, I think, full of potential hardships. And we just did a whole series called The Good Life, so I need to balance it out, all right? We did like 3 months of how good life is, okay? And life is good. It's beautiful. I love that. I love how beautiful and good life is, that God has made friendships, that he's given us creation, that he's given us his presence, that he's given us food to eat and fun to have. And I love all the things that are great about life. But I think that we would be blind if we didn't also realize that life can be hard. And so this September, I want to deal with this a little bit. I want to talk about how do we deal with the fact that life is hard. It's not like we all agree. We just agreed. You raised your hand, so you're committed now. We all agree life can be hard. But what do we do about it? And does the Bible have any instructions to help us? And so here's the thing. Each week, I'm going to talk about a bad strategy, all right, that I myself have employed, and we'll see if you've ever tried it. So here's bad strategy number 1. Just ignore it, and it'll probably go away. Anybody? Yeah? All right, so our car right now, we have spent a lot of money on our cars recently. We've repaired things and repaired things and repaired things and repaired things. The cars are at that age, right, where it's like, should I sell this piece of junk or just drive it into the ground? And so what Mandy, literally the day after we got something else repaired, she said, when you turn right, is it right or left? When you turn right, I think it's turn right, you can feel in the armrest where you can feel this duk, 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 just for a little bit. She's like, I'm pretty sure it's coming from the back right tire. And I said, yeah, we're not going to look at that. I don't know, it's probably something terrible, but let's just ignore it for a while. Let's wait a month or 2 and see if it gets better. Has anyone ever known anything on your car to get better over time? Never. But I still believe this could happen. And for a while, I wasn't noticing it out of sheer denial. But now every time I turn right, and I can't stand. I think I got a good idea what it is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow it up. I'm just going to and claim the insurance. No. I'll have to take it in eventually, but I actually am just ignoring it for a while because I don't want to spend any more money on my stupid cars. Why can't we just have horses? Let's go back in time. Horses they probably never break. And if they do, you just shoot them. Okay. Just ignore it. It'll probably go away. But we do this in our own lives too, don't we? We that medical bill that keeps coming every month. And you're just I'll just put that in the basket with the other medical bills. Maybe it'll go away. Or that recurring problem in your marriage. And you're like, I'm sure we'll grow out of this, right? I heard that. We physical things. Are you the kind of person who's the first time something goes wrong in your body, you're like, it's probably a freak accident. The 3rd or 4th time, you're like, I'm sure it'll go away. And then the 20th time, you're like, maybe I should see a doctor. And by that time, it's horrible. And they're like, you should have come the first time. I never do that. Just ignore it. It'll probably go away. And so what I want to do today is we're going to, each week, we're going to deal with one bad strategy, and we're going to talk about one story from the Bible and how we can learn from it, how to deal with life being hard. Okay? So the story we're going to talk about today is the story of Jonah. And it's okay if you don't know the Bible, if you've never heard of Jonah. That's totally fine. I'm going to tell you the whole story today. All right, so Jonah was a prophet of God. This is in the Old Testament. So this is, 1,000+ years before Jesus. And he has this, all we know about him, he's in this book and he's in one other place. So God would often talk to the nation of Israel through prophets. And so he tells Jonah to do something. And this is where we meet Jonah. The word of the Lord, this is the first 2 verses, came to Jonah, and he said, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness has come up before me. So this is the mission that God sets out for Jonah. And so what we think, this whole story, it's 4 chapters long, this whole time, we think the problem is that God has asked Jonah to go to this city, this huge city of 120,000 people who are enemies of Israel. And so we think the problem is that Jonah's afraid to die. He's afraid to go and talk to these people. We're going to find out in the 4th chapter, and this is often how Hebrew literature will work, is they don't tell you everything up front. They want you to discover it kind of like in real time. So sometimes the big point will be in the middle. Sometimes it'll gradually appear as the end approaches. And that's what happens with this book. So we're going to find out what his real problem is, not until chapter 4. But the story is set up. So we get this, right? God tells Jonah, go to this scary city. And so Jonah's got a problem. And we're going to find out he feels really sorry for himself. He thinks his life is really hard now. And so he's going to try a couple ways to ignore it, just like we do. So the first thing he does is he tries to run from his problems. Jonah ran away from the Lord. That's the next verse, okay? God says, go do this. Jonah ran away from the Lord, and he headed for Tarshish. I'll talk about that in a second. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Here's a map, because I don't know where any of those places are. You probably don't either. So he's right there in that middle location that I forget. He travels a tiny little bit to Joppa, and then he just takes off in the opposite direction. So people aren't totally sure where Tarshish is, but they think it's probably in Spain. So he was not just going a little bit far away. He was taking off, right? So Nineveh was about 500 miles from where he was. He was headed to a place about 2,500 miles in the other direction. He was gone. He was like, peace out, God. I am leaving. Send somebody else. And this is sometimes what we do. We run from our problems. This is one of the ways that we ignore it. I don't know about you, but do you ever find yourself scrolling aimlessly on your phone? Some of you are like, I don't own a phone, and I think you're amazing, right? But sometimes, do you ever just get trapped? And you're just like, and maybe you're aware, and maybe you aren't aware, that there's other stuff that you probably should be dealing with. Like, why am I just scrolling tonight? Why am I spending an hour watching reels about boats at sea that look like they're going to capsize? Because that is apparently what my algorithm has been showing me a lot of recently. Big boats looking like they're going to capsize. And now I'm always like, is that real? Or is that, or that sort of AI generated? Or like people hiking on ice and it's dangerous. Also, and the third one that my algorithm thinks I like is POV shots of mountain biking. Like, it's just random. Like, I watched one of those once and it was like, he loves mountain biking. Quick, feed him lots of mountain biking. And so I'm just scrolling. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty interesting, actually. Wow, look at that boat, And it's mindless. And that's why it's good. That's why it feels good. I don't know if maybe I'm the only one. I try to stay hip with the youngsters, so I scroll a lot, okay? Do you ever find yourself, hold on, this is going to hurt, eating too much or sleeping too much or sleeping too little? Do you ever find yourself like angry kind of under the surface for no reason? Just like, it's like that buzz in the background. Kind of like maybe walking around. You're not like cursing out loud, but you sure are cursing a lot in your head. Anybody? I mean, it happens to me and I'm a pastor, so I'm assuming it happens to everyone else. Just kidding. Pastors are no different. Scrolling, eating too much, cursing under your breath. That's just yesterday for me, right? Like, that's just getting through the day. Seriously. Do you ever deal with this kind of stuff? Like, wonder, why is this anger level right here, right? Like, why is it like that? And one of the things we do is we're just like, I'm sure it'll get better. And so we entertain ourselves, we distract ourselves, we feed ourselves, we do anything other than dealing with the underlying issue. Am I pressing any buttons in the room yet? Yeah. We run from our problems just like Jonah did. Okay, the second thing that Jonah tries is he just decides to slap a Band-Aid on it. So let me tell you what's happened this is chapter 3. So Jonah gets on this boat. He takes off for Tarshish, which I'm tired of saying because it's really hard to say. And a big storm comes up and the people on the boat are like, why is this storm? We're all about to die. And Jonah says, it's my fault. Throw me into the sea. And they're like, no way, we're not going to kill you. So they throw all their stuff into the sea. The storm continues. And Jonah says, it's my fault. Like, throw me in the sea. Throws into the sea. The storm stops, and they save the sailors. God sends a fish to protect Jonah for 3 days and puts him back where he started. He gets a redo. Okay? And then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim the message I give you. So Jonah obeyed the Lord and went to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. Jonah began by going, now listen, 1 day into the city, proclaiming 7 words. 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. And he turns around and leaves. I mean, can you imagine? Like, I've never read it this way. I was listening to a commentary about this. Jonah is the most half-hearted prophet ever. He did not go through the whole city proclaiming anything. He walked a third of the way in, was like, that's pretty good. And he was like, you guys are going to die. Turned around and left. He didn't go proclaiming anything. It was 7 words. If you've read any of the other prophets in the Old Testament, those dudes are anything but succinct, right? Isaiah rambles on for chapters and chapters and just says the same thing over and over again. Jonah, he just wants to get out of town. He's going to do the bare minimum that God has asked him to do. And I think that this is true of us sometimes. We just, like, yeah, I'll go to therapy once. And we're like, it didn't fix it. I guess I'm screwed. You know, like we don't follow through with it. I don't know if that's like you or not. Like, have you ever been like, I'm so frustrated with being overweight, and you go on a diet for a week and you're like, doesn't work. Like, we slap Band-Aids on. Here's a few that I do. Ready? The one time should do it strategy. I really wish this was true, right? I love to slap a Band-Aid on stuff. And this is true about therapy. So recently I was noticing a lack of motivation, which is really rare for me. I'm a highly motivated, energetic person. Lack of motivation, kind of feeling down, kind of feeling lethargic. And I thought, you know what? As a mature Christian adult, I should go see my therapist because I haven't seen her in a while. So I go see her, 1 session, and I'm like, got that. Let's go. Yep. I've got some underneath the surface grieving about aging and having so much pain in my body. I can deal with that. And I did not schedule another appointment. I just went home and thought, that wraps that up. I shouldn't be sad anymore. And that's the title of the series, by the way. How's that working for you? How's that working for you? Right? How about the grand gesture? Do you ever get so stressed out about how much you have on your credit card? And you're like, that's it. We're paying a big lump sum. But you don't deal with the small problem that's been making it become a bigger problem. Like, you don't deal with that. How about the half truth? Like, you've got someone that you're frustrated with, maybe a spouse or maybe a friend, and you're like, work up the courage to talk about this thing, this coming between you. And then when you sit down and start talking about it, you don't really say it all. You just say some to kind of, maybe you're hoping if I say a little, it'll change a lot. And then lo and behold, it doesn't fix the problem, does it? Because you weren't totally honest. Has anybody ever, don't raise your hand, have you ever done that? Have you ever tried, I'll share part of it and see if that solves it? Instead of we got to really talk this out. We got to really rip the Band-Aid off and really get into this. I did this recently also with my body. It wasn't a real Band-Aid, but I shared a little while ago about how I had this random thing. Don't you love how God gives me so many physical ailments just to keep the stories fresh here on Sunday mornings? I really appreciate it. So I've had this thing where it's felt like my throat was closing up and I was going to die. And I've been to the doctor a couple of times for it. And the most recent one I went to actually kind of had a legitimate, logical answer. And I loved it. It was really good. And so they gave me some strategies with 3 medicines that it's like reflux and allergies combining to make my throat die. And so I take these 2 medicines, I solve it, it's gonna be great. And then I thought that was gonna be it. I love the quick fix. I can take a pill every day. That's great. And then she busts out the thing that I hate that doctors do, exercises. Don't you hate that? I don't have time to do a bunch of stretches for my neck. And so she pulls out this thing. It's like, now you gotta do these stretches 17,000 times a day and do these stretches. And it's like, hold it for 10, and I just can't, and I don't have the time. Who has and I'm supposed to be stretching my Achilles. I'm supposed to be stretching my neck. I'm supposed to be stretching my throat. I don't have time I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. just to stretch for an hour. And so I have not stretched but one time. But I'm taking those pills. And here's the bad thing is it's self-fulfilling prophecy because it's working. And I'm like, the lady doesn't know what she's talking about. I don't need to stretch nothing, So I'm like that. Are you like that? You just want to do the bare minimum. I mean, that's Jonah. Instead of dealing with the actual problem, you just kind of do the bare minimum. And here's the third one. And this one is a lot more serious, but it's in the text, so I want to deal with it. After he goes and preaches, they actually turn from their wicked ways, and God heals them, and God blesses them and forgives them. And this makes Jonah so angry. And this is where we start to see that the problem wasn't Jonah being sent to a dangerous city, but the problem was in Jonah's heart. And the story becomes much more rich than we first imagined. And Jonah says, Lord, kill me. I would rather die. He would rather die than deal with his problem. His problem is a hard heart that is unwilling to be merciful and forgiving and loving. And he would rather, this is the third time. There's 3 times. Actually, this is the second time. There's 3 times in these 4 chapters where Jonah wants his life to end. And so this is also something that happens in our lives. There are times when our problems, remember, life is hard. One of the ways that we ignore it or avoid the problem is to give up. And we give up in a bunch of different ways as humans. So we can give up by self-medicating, right? This is when you feel like your problems are so big and you don't think you can solve them, you start to feel trapped and the walls start to close in. And this is where people start to make decisions that they never thought they would make. This is where addiction comes from, because you feel so trapped. And so addiction is this one way that you can maybe have some power over your life. Maybe it turns into an eating disorder, or maybe it turns into substance abuse. Maybe that substance abuse gives you that momentary escape from the crushing trap that life has begun to feel like. And these are I know, we've been laughing a little bit this morning, which is good, but these are real issues. And what I love about the Bible is the Bible deals with real issues. Jesus said, in this life, you will have trouble, but have no fear, I've overcome the world. And so what we see here is him going beyond that. So addiction, self-harm. I can't tell you, working with teenagers over the last 30 years, how many times I have talked to teenagers and young adults who struggle with self-harm. And on the outside, it doesn't make sense, but if you were in their body, it would make sense to you, because it's one way that they can get the pain on the inside out onto the outside. And we also know that suicide right now is at the highest rate that it's been. It started to go down, and now it's coming back up. I looked up some statistics around suicide, and listen, I just want to I know this is sensitive. I know this is not something that's easy to talk about. And I think it's important we talk about it in church. Personally, we can't just let the world try to handle all the hard things, and we just talk about how much God loves us. This is a real issue that's facing Christian teenagers. It's facing Christian men. It's facing Christian adults. I tried to look up, who deals with suicide the most in our country. I mean, to be honest, it's everybody. It skews more towards men, but age-wise, the two that stick out is over 65 and then the young adult age. But it's pretty high for everybody. It's not only one time in your life. This is a thing. And there's some really big number of people who have thought about it, who struggled with those thoughts. And so probably everyone in this room has either dealt with those thoughts or knows someone who has. And so what do we do with that? And this is one of the things that is very real, that when problems get too tight and too compact and the lie that we begin to believe is that we're trapped and we're stuck and we can't get out of the problems and the problems are too big, then we look for, we start to give up. How? I can't do this. And what's crazy is in this story, there's a story underneath the story. And it's the story of Jesus. And that's the beginning of the answer for all of us and for the people that we know and the people that we love who are dealing with this. So in this story, you see Jonah on a ship with people who are dying. And Jonah gets thrown into the sea, sacrificing himself, swallowed by a whale for 3 days. That is a not so subtle nod to what Jesus is going to do for all of us. That we are on that ship, that life is hard, that we are sinking without God, that we are broken, that we are dying, that we are hopeless without God. And Jesus, now the difference is Jonah was at fault. Jesus was perfectly not at fault. And the one who was not at fault sacrifices himself 3 days in the tomb, 3 days under the earth. Jonah was under the water. Jesus was under the earth. And he went not just to save us from sin, like we should know this, but he went to defeat death and all the power of the enemy. And so all of that, all of the lies and deception and suicidal ideation and self-harm, all of that has roots in the enemy. So the good news of the whole story, like Jonah's a little story telling the whole story, and the good news of the whole story is that Jesus came to in order to be able to address these issues that we face every day. Jesus died and rose again to defeat death, to defeat pain, to defeat suffering, to give us an answer for when life is so hard, I don't know what else to do. Jesus gives us a way out. Jesus gives us hope. He gives us a plan B in him, that we don't have to just say, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to go into addiction. I'm going to go into self-harm. I'm going to, take my own life. But Jesus gives us another way, an alternate route. And so listen, this isn't a teaching all about that, but it's all of the ways that we can just try to ignore our problems instead of dealing with them. And where we're going to see this story go is that the invitation to actually face our problems is where we're going to find healing. But before I go there, sorry, it's a little slow. If you're battling mental health issues today, or if you know someone who is, I don't feel like I can responsibly bring up what we're talking about and not give a resource or two. So the 988 is the suicide and crisis hotline that is always available 24 hours a day. We have a mental health ministry in our church. You can go to that website right there, or you can email us at info@ourcitylight.org. We have people who are experienced mental health people who aren't going to give you counseling, but they're going to give you support. We're going to try to help you understand what some next steps might be. You can also reach out to me. If you're struggling, if you're feeling the pressure is coming in, the walls are closing in. Listen, I have personally been there. I have dealt with mental health crises, both in myself and in my family. It's something Mandy and I talk a lot about from the front. We want to be a church where that is not something you need to be ashamed of, but it's something that you can get help for. All of the stuff that we deal with, there are ways to walk through them. And the lie of the enemy is that you're going through something that no one's ever faced and there's no answers. That's a lie. And so reach out. Reach out. Okay. So what was Jonah's actual problem? Jonah's actual problem, okay, got it. Jonah's actual problem was inside his heart. So he prayed to the Lord. He said, after God forgave the city, he said, isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? This is what I tried to forestall by fleeing. I knew that you're gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, Lord, and this is where he says it for the second time, take away my life. See, the issue, the problem with Jonah was in his heart. And so here's what's really interesting about this story, and we're about to close, okay? We have these three characters in this story, big characters. We have the people of Nineveh, we have Jonah, and we have God. And what you're expecting to happen in the story is Jonah, as the man of God, is going to be the one who does the good thing in the story. And the Ninevites, who are the evil, wicked people who don't believe in God, that they're going to get punished. But as often happens in the Bible, like doesn't this remind you of stories that Jesus would tell? the man of God ends up not doing what he was supposed to do. He runs from his problem. His problem is his heart. And it's not till the very end that he confesses to God and faces his problem, but he doesn't face it to deal with it. He just gives up. He ends up going outside the city, sitting down and pouting. And that's where we leave him at the end of the story, complaining and pouting. He never has a change of heart. Ironically, the people who are furthest from God are the only ones in the story who actually face their problem. Hold on. Here we go. So the Ninevites believed God. After Jonah gave his rousing 7-word speech, it says the Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed. So what do the Ninevites do? They admit that they're going through a hard time. They admit that it's too much for them. They admit their sin, whatever it is, right, that you might be dealing with. They face their problem rather than ignoring it. As a whole nation, from the greatest to the least, they put on sackcloth, which is just a sign of mourning. They called a fast. They said, let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. And so as the story comes to a close, the whole story that you thought was going to happen gets flipped upside down. And the ones who you thought were going to be the bad people, the antagonists of the story, turn out being the ones who learned, the ones who give their lives to God. And God blesses them. And then on the backside, you have this Jonah who's supposed to be a man of God. We leave him on a hill outside the city that God is blessing, alone, pouting, and wanting to die. And it's a powerful, powerful, juxtaposition of two ways that we can deal with life. We can try to ignore it, run from it, give up, slap a Band-Aid on it, or we can face it. And see, life is hard, but ignoring your problems isn't going to make it any easier. So this is week 1. We're going to talk about 3 more ways, bad strategies, for dealing with when life gets hard. But the first step is we have to face it. And the thing that's amazing about following God, and so if you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, the great invitation of Jesus is you don't have to face any of these problems alone. You don't have to face your marital problems alone. You don't have to face your grief alone. You don't have to face your temptations and your struggles alone. Jesus offers, right? Just like he did with the Ninevites, he offers to come and stand with you and help you and give you grace and give you comfort and give you healing. Jesus has everything that we need when we turn to him. Worship team, you guys can come up. So the first step, as is often true in life, is admitting that we have a problem, right? So as you're listening to this, is there anything in your life that you're ignoring? Is there anything that you're covering up with a Band-Aid? Is there anything that you're just trying to do the bare minimum? Is there anything that you know is going wrong, but you're filling your life with busyness, you're working more, you're filling your life with distraction, with entertainment, you're sleeping too much, you're eating, whatever, is there anything in your life that you feel just trapped in and you just want to give up? Is there anything in your life, a relationship issue that you're not dealing with, a work issue you're not dealing with, an emotional issue you're not dealing with? So I told you that I went to the therapist that one time, and it did not solve all my problems, although I thought it might. And so I went back. And what God has been doing in my life, I met with a pastor friend of mine last week, and we sat down, and he was like, so, how are you doing? And it's just like this thing you do. And I just said, I'll be honest, I'm not doing well. I'm not doing well. And I've embraced that recently. I'm going to face it. I'm going through some stuff in my life, and I have good days and bad days. And I'm not saying I need to be happy all the time. But right now, life is a little bit more difficult than normal for me. And that's okay. And I think there's something in me, and I don't know if you're like this, there's something in me that wants to I feel a little bit like a failure for not being able to handle my life being hard better. You ever feel that way? I said that to my therapist, and she's like, wow, you're really hard on yourself. It's like, yeah. So I've decided it's okay. I'm going to face my problem. I'm not going to run from it. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm not going to slap a Band-Aid on it. I'm going to lean into it, and I'm going to ask for help. So I'm talking to my therapist. I've been talking to some friends. I've been getting prayer. I've been trying to take care of myself. Been trying to spend more time in the Word and prayer in the morning. And it's not quickly solving my problems. And I think that that's part of the point. But I hope that me sharing some of that can encourage you. Like, God isn't just like, hey, hold on and wait till heaven gets here. He actually wants to help us walk through these issues. And I think that we're going to grow. Our faith is going to get deeper. We're going to learn more about Jesus. And we're going to find that Jesus has everything we need, that he has the grace that we need. He has the hope that we need. He has the truth that we need to combat some of those lies. He has the strength that we need when we're too weak. He has the wisdom that we need when we don't know what to do. Like in Jesus, when we turn to him and face our problems with him, in Jesus, we find everything that we need. No problem is too big for him. No problem is too complex for him. No problem is brand new for him that he's never heard of before. Whatever you are wrestling with or struggling with right now, this is where we need to start. We need to name it, face it with Jesus. Amen? Yes. All right. So we're going to end with 2 songs, as we always do. Let this be a time as you're worshiping where you take some time. Like, invite the Holy Spirit to speak to your heart about things that you might be ignoring that God wants to work in your heart with.